डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Welcome to Chaitanya Studio of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. I am Dr. Margi Parikh, affiliated as a professor with BK School of Professional and Management Studies, Gujarat University. I am here to discuss with you the course of organizational behavior. As part of that course, today we are going to start with the block 1, unit 1, which is about introduction to organizations and organizational behaviors. Our specific learning objectives can be seen on the screen here. The first is definition and meaning of organizations. You know, if we want to understand behavior within organizations, it is important to understand what organizations are. After that, we are going to proceed to discuss what is the need and what is the process of organizing. After that, we are going to see what is organizational behavior, and lastly, we will see the fields of knowledge which contribute to our understanding of organizational behavior. In this session, we are going to cover the first two objectives. Fine, so let us begin with what organizations are. The first point is that it is important to understand what organizations are. Because our subject is organizational behavior, naturally we want to understand how people behave within the organizations, but if we have never worked inside an organization, it could be difficult to understand organizational behavior. Understanding that some of you may be fresh students, we are going to therefore bring to you what organizations are. Second is, what is organizational behavior? That is our course objective broadly. Without work experience, it is difficult to not only understand behavior, but more difficult will be to manage other people's behavior. You need not worry if you have never been inside a formal organization as an employee. As this point here says, organizations are everywhere around us. From the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to sleep, we do come into contact with some organization or the other, directly or indirectly. Do you wonder why? For example, you get up and take in your hands your toothbrush and toothpaste. There is some organization which manufactures these products, and number of other organizations come into picture in making these products reach your home. Likewise, from the time a person is born to the time the person says goodbye to this world, there are number of organizations involved. Not very difficult to guess. For example, when a baby is born, a birth certificate has to be made. The baby may be born in a hospital. All these are organizations: the municipal corporation, the hospital, the institution which arranges for the burial or the cremation of the departed. There are all organizations all around a person. Well, not all organizations are formal. For example, you have been a member of a family. Family is a social organization. So, whether the organization is a formal one, created, a corporate one, or a social one, the organization needs to be created. Someone is behind the process of creating the organizations. For example, social entities come together when two people decide to create a social organization. And a business organization comes into being when some partners or promoters come together and decide to incorporate a business in some form or the other. In short, we know that the organizations are artificial. There is no universal set of rules which applies to how the organization should function or what the process of that organization's operations should be. But even if there is no right or wrong in deciding that, we know that country-wise, state-wise, region-wise or community-wise, there are rules, there are conventions and there are norms with which the organizations are governed. So, in spite of the fact that we cannot directly decide what is right and wrong for an organization, we can apply the rules and norms and conventions to regulate what the organizations do. Of course, not all of us may be creating formal business organizations, but that should not be a point of worry for you, because you may still be an employee, an associate, a consultant, in a number of positions you can think of yourself as getting associated with an organization. So even if you have not started an organization, there will be a time when you will be working with or working for an organization. Therefore, by now, I hope that you would have seen why it is important for us to understand the organizations. If we understand the organizations well, then there are some benefits to be had. For example, if you are working for them, if you are managing the organizations, and if you happen to be in charge for changing those organizations. For all these cases, working, managing and changing organizations would require you to understand what organizations are. So, the process of understanding would start with seeing how the organization is designed and then seeing how the organization is managed, which is very important part of any manager's responsibility and a part of functions of management. I hope that in your course of introduction to management, you would have seen the basic functions of management, and organizing is an important part of managerial functions in any organization. It is known, as I said, as function of organizing. Once the, you know, or I hope you have already seen that every organization is bound to some kind of goals. Because organizations are created, as we saw some time back, the organizations are supposed to be created with some purpose or some goals. So once those goals are selected, the function of organizing performs several basic activities. For example, create tasks which need to be performed. If the goal is to be achieved, what tasks or what operations must be undertaken? If, for example, if I want to reach somewhere, some place, then I have to select my path, select whether I'm going to walk or ride a vehicle or call a taxi, and then I have to drive or I have to walk or I have to sit inside. There are a number of activities associated with a goal selected. Same thing happens in case of organizations. But sometimes, you know, those activities could be too many. Imagine a business organization. It would be required to perform a number of operations, and it could sometimes be very confusing if all the tasks are just loosely stacked one after the other or one on the top of the other. Therefore, very often what managers do is create some kind of groups based on some kind of logic, so that the tasks become sequential and they become grouped, so that the logical order is clear and confusion is removed. Once that is done, the process of organizing will find out the positions to which these groups or these clusters of tasks can be assigned, because naturally you can understand that no one person can undertake all the activities which require to be performed in a fairly large organization. You don't have to go very far. If you go to a nearby, let us say, supermarket or a large shop nearby, then you would see that it involves several people working. Somebody would be looking after the activities at the counter. Somebody would be looking after the activities of, let us say, going inside the store and fetching the goods which the customer has asked for or requested. Somebody will be packing. Somebody will be making sure if the customer needs anything else, or maybe arranging the shelves. So when organizing, we as managers are expected to assign different clusters or groups of tasks to different positions. We will be talking about that later also, but you should note that at this juncture, we are not talking about people. We are talking about the positions. The function of organizing starts, therefore, going back to the original point, that it starts with the goals which it is supposed to achieve. It's not difficult to guess, therefore, that if the goals are simple, if the tasks required are simple and fewer, then there would be fewer positions and therefore fewer people required to fill those positions. If the tasks are complex and if the tasks are many, then they would require more positions and therefore more people. If these tasks are not arranged in some fashion, as we just saw some time back, if some logic is not applied, if the groups are not created in some kind of clearly understandable logic, then it can be very confusing, not only for those who are assigned those tasks, but also those who are in charge of managing those tasks. Therefore, when we are discussing organizing as a function, we are first talking about establishing the underlying logic and creating a structure, and we are not yet ready to talk about the people who will fill positions within those structures. So, what is meant by the groups or clusters of tasks? Let us see. The function of organizing is primarily about listing, as I previously said, in a very simple case of going from place A to place B. If there is a goal of reaching somewhere, it requires a series of actions, series of tasks to be performed. So, function of organizing is primarily about listing the tasks, because organization is not just about a single individual. The list of tasks doesn't have to exist in one's mind alone. The organizing process involves formal listing of tasks. Then those tasks are arranged in different groups, and if the groups are many, then within the groups also some kind of ordering or some kind of layering is involved. Those layers, as we will see later, are called the hierarchy or levels of organization. You don't have to worry about that at the moment. If you might recognize the groups, well, if you have undergone the subject principles of management, you would have studied the functions of management, and you would recognize that these become departments, and when departments are arranged in layers, they become the levels of management. Together, it is known, the entire process of listing, grouping and arranging the groups is known as the process of creating organization structure. When the process of organizing is complete, then we have a structure which shows different positions. If you are already here in this course, I assume that you would have, at some place or another, you would have seen the diagram of organization structure, which shows a top position, then several positions reporting to the top position, and then another level of positions reporting to the second level. We will come to that later in this course also, so do not worry. To each of which the duties and responsibilities are assigned. Because organization involves several people working together, it is remembered at all the times that what is in the mind of one person does not automatically get understood by other people around that person. Therefore, if a position is created, the duties and responsibilities of that position are also made clear and they are assigned. Later on, these positions will be filled by the people, and that will be, of course, you can guess it is a function of staffing, but when we are talking about the process of organizing, we are not talking about staffing as yet, right? Fine. So, the organizing process results in what is known as organization. Organization is a network of relationships. Relationships between positions is established first in terms of who will do what, who will report to what, and later when people fill those positions, the people understand clearly their relationship. So, it becomes a shared entity where people share the relationships and the people who join for achieving the personal as well as the organizational goals. This point also, probably you are already familiar with that, but I will repeat nevertheless, that organization, as we saw earlier, is created with some kind of a purpose. When I join an organization as an employee, do I have only the organizational goal or do I have my own personal goal as well? You can guess that I will have not only organizational goal. For example, if I am a teacher, I would love the philosophy of education, and education may be an important part of life goal for me, but at the same time, I may have some personal goals. For example, I may love to learn. So, continuous learning could be my personal goal, and my job in the educational sector could help me fulfill my personal goal as well. That is the case of almost everybody and almost every organization. So, as you can see in the diagram here, we have the process of organizing, and the process of organizing leads to some outcome, and that outcome is the structure of an organization. After this introduction, you would be ready to understand the definition of organizations. Of course, the organizations have been defined by a number of people. This issue has been traditionally one of the fundamental issues in the field of management, and number of people have offered their definitions. For example, Money and Riley defined organization as the form of every human association for attainment of a common purpose. If you see, the highlight of every human association would include a professional or business organization as well as a social organization that we saw some time back. Puffier and Sherwood define organization as the pattern of ways in which large number of employees have intimate face-to-face contact with all others, they are engaged in a variety of tasks, relate themselves to each other in conscious, systematic establishment and accomplishment of mutually agreed purposes. Now, this definition says a lot, and as you can see, these two definitions highlight different features or different aspects of organization. So, in a little while, we will be discussing the features or properties or characteristics of organization. What organizations are, because if it doesn't help us much as managers if we simply remember one or two definitions of an organization. When we are actually practicing as managers, it would help little, but more help can be derived from your understanding if you know what are the distinguishing or defining characteristics or features of organizations. See the first one. Organizations are not necessarily for making profit. From the first definition, we saw that the more important feature for an organization is a purpose, but that purpose doesn't have to be the purpose of making profit. Are you aware of any organizations that do not aim at making profit? A local government, for example, or a service organization like a community hospital or a charitable trust. NGO these days, non-profit organizations which are oriented to service are often called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. They are all examples of organizations which are not aiming at making profit. Whenever people come together for achieving a shared goal, there is a possibility of an organization. What does this feature say? It says that whenever people come together, you do not automatically have an organization. For example, if at a bus stand, people are standing and waiting for a bus. The bus stand has a stop for several buses, and let us assume that it is a morning rush hour, so about 15-20 people are waiting together. Will it be an organization? Our understanding so far would say that no, just because people have come together and they are spending some time at a particular place doesn't make it an organization. It has to be created, as we saw earlier, and they have to have a shared goal, though shared goal is just getting a bus and going to office, but that is their own independent goal of what other people are doing, and therefore that doesn't make it an organization. As we saw in the beginning, the organizations need to be created. So legally, or if you have studied corporate finance, you would know that, or corporate laws, you know that organizations are artificially created entities, and in your law or finance related subjects, you probably would have already seen the legal aspect of it and how that identity is conferred upon an organization. Organizations are supposed to be created for goals. So organization itself also has a goal, not just the people who choose to later work with it. These goals may not be articulated very well. You know that there are organizations such as partnerships, or there are organizations such as a limited liability companies, and they have their founding documents. In these documents, the aim, objective, and purpose of the organization are spelled out. But because a legal document says that an organization has a particular purpose, it doesn't mean that what satisfies a legal requirement also satisfies the managerial requirement. In terms of management, we say that articulation of the goal is very important, because that in an articulated form, that goal has to be clear enough for all organizational members to understand. In large organizations, sometimes the goal of senior management are not known to the lower level management. You know that senior management people and the lower level people may not always sit together, may not always communicate directly. As we have just seen some time back, there are layers upon layers of activities and positions in large organizations. So there would be many people who work at the lower level in the organization who would have never talked to their managing director or their CEO. In that case, how would the goals be discussed in between those people? So what is in the minds of senior level managers may not be clear to lower people, and what is in the minds of lower level employees may not be very clear to the high level managers. Also, this is maybe slightly indicating the darker side of the organizations, but what organizations do, because they are a legal entity, it doesn't mean that everything that the organization does is legal or even ethical. If you have been reading newspapers, then you would know about this very well. There are organizations which are involved in malpractices, in rackets, and in activities which are legally prohibited or legally defined as a crime. So just because there is an organization, it doesn't mean that everything they do, because they have a legal entity, it doesn't mean that everything they do is legal. But every organization does serve some purpose and some goals, whether they are stated, whether they are articulated, whether they are commonly shared or not. The second definition has mentioned the word patterns, if you have noted. These patterns may be the patterns under many processes. Those may be the patterns that people who are working together adopt, or the way things things are done together by people, and the way people relate with each other. Of course, there are many more patterns, but at this juncture, I will not load you with a lot of examples. As you know, the organizations exist because people cannot achieve difficult or very complex goals just by themselves. So the tasks to do requires interrelated and interdependent effort. In an organization, every person may be doing what they are assigned to do, but it doesn't mean that they will be independently achieving those tasks. So previously what we have mentioned is a kind of representation of various levels in the organization. Organizations have structures made by departments. That point also we have seen. These levels are known as hierarchy. Hierarchy means a ladder, and like the steps in the ladder going up and down, the organization has levels from bottom to top or top to bottom. The hierarchical structure makes it possible for people to work in a systematic fashion, because you know that every position is related in some way or the other with some other positions. Organizations are social systems. They are created when people join together for working towards a common goal. Organizations have a life cycle, and life cycle has phases: launch, growth, maturity, pause, and then there is question mark. Whether the organization will continue to grow, whether it will face some rough patches, and what will it do when it faces some challenges depends on how they are managed or how they are led. So, here is an example of a construction site. I assume that some of you would not have worked in an organization. So, taking an example of a construction site, you may see a lot of activity going on. A lot of people will be doing different things. Some people will be mixing the cement, some will be carrying, some will be supervising, some will be handling a back office operation. So, not everybody is seen together at the first time when you encounter an organization, but all these activities are interrelated, and people somehow are working and contributing their efforts in such a way that overall the organization's goal are achieved. Even a stock market is another example. You may see that there is a lot of chaos, but when actually trading happens, it is not just the people on the trading site or trading link that you see. There are people who govern, people who manage the software, people who fulfill the legal formalities. There are number of people, number of activities, number of positions, and these all positions are interrelated and interdependent with each other. The reasons for creating an organization: one person cannot achieve all the goals in a meaningful manner that we have seen previously. We read that one man reforested an entire patch of land, but that is very rare. So people need help, and when it is about business, it is better not to undertake a huge task on oneself. Organization can have resources beyond the reach of single individuals. Organizations can amass a lot of resources, and we have seen that the outcome of organizing is an organization structure. We also saw that organizing is the process by which managers bring order out of chaos and possible confusion and create the conditions which support the people who will be joining later to work together so that the goals can be achieved. So here we bring the end to the first part of this session, and I would summarize it for you what we have just seen. We have seen why we need to understand what organizations are for the purpose of understanding what is organizational behavior. We are interested, our primary interest is in organizational behavior, but what people do within organization cannot be understood very well if we do not have a clear idea of what organizations are. We saw organization as a result or an outcome of the process of organizing. We saw organizing as a basic function of management, where the important consideration for the people who create organizations are to have some kind of goals, to create positions, to arrange the positions in a particular logical order, assign responsibilities, and then so that later people can join those organizations. We saw some definitions of organizations, and we saw some distinguishing features of what organizing involves and what organization involves. By the definition, when we checked the organizations, we identified some important characteristics of having patterns of working together, having goals, and having systematic linkages, interdependence, and interaction with each other. And we saw that there could be possible chaos and confusion if organizing efforts are not made effectively. The word effectively means it shows the degree to which one's goals of doing that thing are achieved. So if my goal is organizing, how well I have achieved my goal of organizing shows the effectiveness that I have achieved. So effective organizing achieves an organization which is likely to achieve its goal. With this, we come to the end of this session, and I will see you soon for the part 2 of this session, when we will discuss what is organizational behavior and what are the fields of knowledge or disciplines which contribute to our understanding of organizational behavior. Thank you very much for joining, and see you very soon.
स्वाध्यायः परमः